It's so strange to think about how an era filled with brutal religious wars could also be the time when, like, the seeds of modern science and philosophy were planted.
It really is a fascinating contradiction, and it's something that Will and Ariel Durant tackle head on in The Age of Reason Begins.
Oh, yeah, the Durants.
This book, it's the seventh volume in their massive Story of Civilization series.
Okay.
It takes us back to Europe between 1558 and 1648, a time when religious authority began to give way to, well, the early stirrings of the Enlightenment.
Right. It's like a huge turning point in history that
Exactly.
so much happened during that time. And I bet it can feel overwhelming to even know where to start unpacking it all.
Absolutely, but that's where I think the Durants are so helpful. They provide this incredible analysis of a really transformative and often very turbulent period.
Right. And that's kind of our goal today, to like distill their insights into this time so that we can all wrap our heads around this pivotal shift without getting, lost in the weeds.
I think that's a great way to put it.
And for listeners who really dig into these kinds of historical turning points, I've got to mention channels like Mindful Moments and our podcasts on YouTube. They use AI to analyze audiobooks and pull out all these insightful nuggets.
Yeah.
It's really cool stuff.
I'll have to check that out. So where do we begin with this Age of Reason? I know the Durants start by introducing us to some of the most powerful monarchs of the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've got Elizabeth I of England, Philip II of Spain, and Henry I of France. These rulers were shaping a continent that was, deeply divided by religion and politics.
And their decisions had such far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with Elizabeth I.
Okay.
The Durants present her as a really clever politician.
Yeah.
She had this remarkable ability to navigate all these religious tensions in England.
Right, and during her reign, you also have the incredible flowering of the English Renaissance.
The age of Shakespeare.
Exactly. But the Durants also show us Elizabeth's complexities. She wasn't just a shrewd ruler. She was a person with her own contradictions and flaws.
Right. It makes her even more interesting.
It-
So then you have Philip II of Spain, Elizabeth's Catholic rival.
Right. He ruled over this vast empire, and he was a staunch defender of Catholicism.
His efforts to push back against Protestantism were huge.
Oh, absolutely. The book talks about the Spanish Armada, his attempt to invade England.
Such a dramatic moment in history.
And while he's often seen as this kind of zealous figure, the Durants also acknowledge his talents as an administrator.
Oh,
They
interesting.
paint a picture of him as a very disciplined person, both in his personal life and in his approach to governing.
It's like these different sides to these major historical figures.
I think that's what makes the Durants' work so fascinating.
Totally. Okay, so then there's Henry IV of France.
Ah, yes, Henry. His approach to all the religious strife in France was, well, remarkably pragmatic.
Yeah, he famously converted to Catholicism, saying Paris is worth a mass.
Right. He knew that to bring peace to his deeply divided country, he needed to make that move.
And then he went on to issue the Edict of Nantes.
A truly landmark decision granting Protestants significant rights.
It's kind of amazing to think about how, in such an intolerant time, he was pushing for religious tolerance.
It was a bold and really forward-thinking move.
For sure. So we've got these three monarchs, each dealing with the challenges of their time. But when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear that the political landscape was incredibly unstable.
Oh, absolutely.
You have the complexities of the Stuart succession in England.
Right, and then the French monarchy was struggling to find its footing after decades of internal conflict.
And then you have the Holy Roman Empire, which was basically just a bunch of smaller states all vying for power.
It was a recipe for chaos, and as the Durants point out, so much of this instability stemmed from religion.
Right. Religious conflict was the defining characteristic of this era.
Sadly, yes. The Durants really drive this point home. They describe how wars fueled by different interpretations of Christian doctrine dominated the continent.
Like the French Wars of Religion.
The conflict between the Catholics and the Huguenots was incredibly brutal and bloody.
The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in 1572.
It's a chilling example of how religious convictions can lead to horrific violence.
It's hard to believe something like that could happen.
It's a dark chapter in history, and the Durants don't shy away from depicting the horrors of these times.
Right. And the violence wasn't limited to France?
No, the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule was another long and brutal conflict.
In that case, it wasn't just about religion, though, right?
You're right. The Dutch people's desire for religious freedom was definitely a major factor, but it was intertwined with this emerging sense of national identity.
It was like a proto-nationalist movement.
Exactly, and you also have to consider the economic and political grievances that were simmering beneath the surface.
Right, it was a complex situation with all these different factors coming together.
And then, of course, you have the 30 Years' War, which the Durants analyze in depth.
This one started as a religious dispute within the Holy Roman Empire, but then it just exploded into this massive European conflict.
The Durants paint a very vivid picture of the devastation caused by this war. The widespread destruction, the massacres, the economic ruin, especially in Germany.
It sounds horrific.
It was, and the Durants argue that this immense suffering actually contributed to a growing skepticism towards religious dogma.
It's like people started to question whether any theological difference could possibly justify such widespread horror.
Precisely. It's a powerful argument, and it really highlights the profound impact of these conflicts on European society.
So we have this backdrop of violence and instability, but then something really interesting happens, right?
You're talking about the incredible cultural flowering that occurred during this period.
Exactly. It's almost paradoxical to think about such creativity emerging from such a brutal time.
It's a central tension of the era, and the Durants capture it beautifully.
So let's talk about some of these achievements.
Okay.
In England, despite all the religious and political turmoil, you have this amazing literary explosion during the English Renaissance.
And at the heart of it all is Shakespeare.
The Durants offer a nuanced appreciation of his work. They don't just focus on his plays. They consider his life, his context, and the lasting value of his art.
Right. They acknowledge that we know relatively little about Shakespeare the person, but his genius as a writer shines through centuries later.
And it's so interesting how, while all this was happening in England, Spain was experiencing its own golden age of literature.
Right, Cervantes and Don Quixote.
The Durants highlight how Don Quixote was this incredibly innovative work. It both celebrates and gently mocks the ideals of chivalry.
It's a reflection of a society in transition grappling with new ideas and values.
It's a timeless story that still resonates with readers today.
Absolutely. Then there's Michel de Montaigne, a figure whom the Durants clearly admire for his embrace of skepticism.
Oh yeah, Montaigne.
His famous line, "Nothing is so firmly believed as that which is least known," really captures the spirit of questioning that was starting to emerge during this time.
It's so true.
And his observation about his own faith being potentially determined by geography, it's fascinating.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, he suggested that if he had been born elsewhere, he might have ended up worshiping the sun instead of the Christian God.
Oh, wow.
It just shows how he was starting to think critically about established beliefs and how much our surroundings shape our worldview.
That's deep.
And of course, we can't forget about the visual arts. The Durants mention artists like El Greco Velázquez and Rembrandt, who each in their own way reflected the spiritual and intellectual currents of this turbulent time.
Right, they were capturing the essence of the era through their art.
Exactly.
So we've got this incredible explosion of culture and art happening, but at the same time, you also have the birth of modern science.
A pivotal development that the Durants give a lot of attention to.
They credit Francis Bacon with really articulating the experimental method.
Right, this revolutionary approach to understanding the natural world based on observation and experimentation.
It's like the foundation of modern science.
Exactly.
And then there's Galileo and his famous conflict with the Catholic Church over support for heliocentrism.
It's such a dramatic story, and it's often portrayed as this clash between science and religion. But the Durants offer a more nuanced perspective.
Oh, how so?
Well, they point out that the idea of a sun-centered solar system was already known at the time. The Church's main issue was that Galileo was presenting it as an established fact rather than a hypothesis.
Oh, I see.
They wanted him to acknowledge that there were still uncertainties and that further investigation was needed.
So it was more about how he was presenting his ideas than the ideas themselves.
Exactly.
And it's important to remember that this scientific awakening wasn't limited to astronomy.
Absolutely. William Harvey's work on blood circulation was groundbreaking.
And then you have Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion.
These were huge advancements that fundamentally changed how humanity understood the natural world.
It's like a whole new way of seeing the universe.
And the Durants emphasize how these scientific discoveries were closely linked to the philosophical developments of the time.
So let's talk about those philosophical underpinnings of modernity. What was happening there?
Well, one of the key shifts that the Durants highlight is the move away from traditional scholasticism.
Which was?
Scholasticism was the dominant intellectual framework for centuries. It relied heavily on the authority of the church and ancient philosophers.
Okay.
But during this period, you start to see a growing interest in new ways of thinking.
And René Descartes emerges as a key figure in this transition.
Right. His famous cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, offered a new foundation for knowledge.
It's such a simple statement, but it's so profound.
It really is. Descartes was basically saying that we can be certain of our own existence because we are capable of thought. And this knowledge doesn't depend on any external authority like the church or ancient texts.
It's like a declaration of intellectual independence.
Exactly. And the Durants explain how Descartes' rationalism, while not outright rejecting religious belief, created a space for questioning and independent thought.
It's like he was opening up new possibilities for how we understand the world and ourselves.
Precisely.
Mhm.
So even as these bloody religious wars were raging, the Durants suggest that a profound cultural shift was happening.
People were becoming more skeptical.
Right. There was an increasing emphasis on empirical observation and a growing questioning of whether theological differences could truly justify so much bloodshed.
It's like people were starting to see beyond the dogma and the violence.
And I think it's important to highlight how the Durants approach history. They tend to focus on the role of individuals in shaping events.
So their narrative is driven by the actions and ideas of the monarchs, artists, philosophers, and scientists of the era.
Exactly. They believe that understanding history requires understanding the people who lived through it and the choices they made.
And they also raise some really thought-provoking questions that still resonate with us today.
Absolutely. One of the questions that they keep coming back to is the basis of morality in a world where religious belief, particularly the fear of hell, might be waning.
Like if people don't believe in eternal punishment, will they still behave morally?
Right. It's a question that has troubled philosophers for centuries, and the Durants don't shy away from it.
They just leave it hanging out there.
Well, they don't offer any easy answers, but they do encourage us to grapple with these difficult questions.
And when you think about the ideological conflicts of that era and compare them to the divisions we see in the world today, it's kind of startling how much those tensions between faith and reason, between different belief systems, still resonate.
As the Durants themselves wrote, we are the creations of history. We are also the creations of the history in this book. We cannot understand ourselves without understanding this history.
It's a powerful reminder that the past is always with us.
And it's also important to remember the paradox of this age, the simultaneous occurrence of immense destruction and incredible artistic and intellectual progress.
The Durants characterized the 30 Years' War as, in some respects, the real First World War.
And they argue that it was a pivotal moment in prompting a reevaluation of religious absolutism.
Like the sheer scale of the devastation forced people to reconsider the justifications for such widespread suffering.
It was a turning point that opened up space for new ways of thinking about the world and the organization of societies.
So when we look back on this period, it's clear that it was a time of profound and often contradictory change.
An era defined by both terrible violence and the birth of ideas that would reshape the modern world.
And the Durant's analysis of this era, as captured in The Age of Reason Begins, provides us with so much to think about.
The challenges and transformations of this period, as they highlight, have a lasting significance for understanding the complexities of our own time.
The interplay between belief reason and the forces that shape civilization is an ongoing process.
And one that we all have a role in shaping.
So if you found this exploration of the early Age of Reason as fascinating as we did, we encourage you to check out The Age of Reason Begins yourself.
There's a link to purchase the book in the show notes.
And please consider subscribing to the show and sharing this episode with anyone who might be interested in this period of history.
And as you go about your day, we'd like to leave you with this thought.
What role do belief and reason play in your own life?
And how do those forces shape the world around you?
It's something to ponder.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp.
And those questions coming.